And if you have any questions throughout this briefing, you can note that in the chat as well. Now I'll go ahead and toss it to Council President Evan Glass for opening remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. Council President Glass, to you.
Okay, thank you, Jordan, and good afternoon, everybody. I have been away for the last 2 weeks, as some of you might have noticed, as I was on an economic development mission to Asia with the county executive, and we were joined by the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and a number of businesses here in Montgomery County and members of the Indian and Vietnamese diaspora, where we were able to meet with some of the most innovative businesses and technology-focused minds in the world. We participated in more than 24 meetings and site visits to discuss opportunities for economic development and partnership in Montgomery County. Among the many meetings we made during the busy 2 weeks were meetings in Hyderabad, Mumbai, and Bangalore in India. And then we also went to Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, in Vietnam. Not lost on many of us was the fact that President Biden visited these two countries in September. The foundation that he laid and the county's strong existing ties with both of these countries really helped to bring all of us together and to have really thoughtful and deep conversations. Now, I know the county executive will share more details about the 2 weeks that we spent, so I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but I will say that I look forward to the continued conversations with the business owners, the organizations, and the academic institutions with whom we met, because I absolutely see us working with many of these businesses in the future, because when we told them about the assets we have here in Montgomery County, the federal institutions that are here, our proximity to Washington, D.C., and the diversity of our residents, they all became excited about working with us. And so I maintain that excitement about what we did, about the conversations that we'll continue to have, and the fruitful progress that will result in our 2-week trip. Switching gears a little bit, want to share with you all that the Anti-Hate Task Force is wrapping up its meetings, with each cohort having provided recommendations on their findings and policy ideas to make those communities safe. The last cohort that will be meeting is the Latino Hispanic cohort, and they will be sharing their recommendations on Zoom this Thursday at 7 p.m. And then after they provide their final report out, there will be one final wrap-up meeting scheduled for November 28th, and that will be the final official meeting of the Anti-Hate Task Force, where everyone gives their high-level overviews of their recommendations, and then the council will officially receive and listen to those recommendations at a council session on December 5th. So this Thursday is the final cohort meeting. The final wrap-up meeting will be November 28th, and then the Anti-Hate Task Force will provide the full council with its report on December 5th. Also, want to share that last week, while I was traveling, we were still busy here in Rockville because I introduced a piece of legislation alongside Council Vice President Friedson that will help the county reach its environmental goals by preserving even more of our tree canopy. Bill 4023, which, as it is known, adjusts the fee structure for trees that are removed in the county's right-of-way. And that will ensure that the fees that are collected for the replacement of these trees are in line with the costs for removing them and replacing them. Now, let me break that down a little bit more. Currently, someone who removes a tree from the county's right-of-way must pay a fee into the Street Tree Planting Fund, and that's maintained by the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. And there is also an applicant for sediment control permit that must be paid to the tree canopy conservation account. Now, the current fee that was set 10 years ago is $250 per tree, but because of inflation and because of other costs, that $250 fee is no longer sufficient to cover the costs of acquiring, planting, and maintaining these trees. So what Bill 4023 will do is reset the cost to replace these trees from $250 to $450 per tree. And that thereafter, it will actually increase a biannual increase based on inflation so that we don't need to have another bill introduced to cover the costs of these trees. This is so important because Montgomery County's trees and forests and parks and green space are among our most treasured assets. Trees reduce stormwater runoff, they provide shelter for wildlife, and they support our environmental goals by keeping our homes cooler in a natural way. And so we need to protect our trees to mitigate climate change, and we want to make sure that we don't lose trees. And this legislation will make sure that we have the trees available to replant them and keep our community cool. Speaking of transportation or environment, actually, I want to just bring your attention to a committee work session, a hearing that we had today at the T&E committee regarding our transition to electric vehicles. A really good 2-hour conversation. And it's a really important one because if we are to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and eliminate them entirely by 2035, we have a lot of work to do in our transportation sector. Our transportation sector accounts for 42% of all carbon emissions in Montgomery County. So we need to bend that curve. And one of the ways we can do that is by making our transition to electric vehicles quicker. And what we learned today is that we got a lot of work to do. Right now in Maryland, only 3% of cars are electric vehicles, but 1/3 of all electric vehicles in the state of Maryland are here in Montgomery County. So we are leading the state, and that is a wonderful thing. And the point of today's conversation was to ensure that we are making the transition to electric vehicles easy for everyone so that they do not have battery anxiety, worrying about making the transition because they won't know how to recharge their batteries. But because of federal support and expected support from the state, we are making those investments. We have a lot more work to do. Happy to provide more information for any of you who are interested. It was a really, really good conversation. And next week, we will be having a conversation about our climate action plan as well. And so this is really important work that we're doing. And then last thing I'll mention before opening it up to questions, tomorrow, the full council will be having our first full conversation on the Fairland and Briggs Cheney master plan. After there were 4 Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee work sessions. And tomorrow's full council will be the first time the full council takes up this issue. We have heard from dozens of members of the community about the Briggs Cheney master plan, about the East County Recreation Center, and how we can provide a roadmap for East County to come into its own over the next decade or two. And so if you're interested in the east part of the county, an area that has not had a master plan update since 1997, I encourage you to look at the staff report, follow tomorrow's conversation. There will be 2 council work sessions. One will be tomorrow, and then we'll carry it on in 2 weeks thereafter, after Thanksgiving. And I think that's all the information I wanted to share with you. And Jordan, I'll turn it back to you to see if anybody has any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Council President Glass. We did get a direct message from Milagro Melendez from El Tiempo Latino. She's driving, so my colleague Marcela Rodriguez will ask the question. Marcela?
Thank you, Jordan. Good afternoon. The following questions on behalf of Milagro Melendez from El Tiempo Latino. Milagros would like to know your point of view on the controversial comments recently made by the organization CASA regarding the Gaza conflict, and could this controversy cause potential ramifications on the organization's future funding prospects? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. CASA's statement was particularly hurtful to me. It was hurtful not only because of what they said, but because of their dedication to equality and social justice, as exemplified by their work with minority communities. Following these remarks, I connected CASA with local Jewish organizations to engage in a conversation that fosters deeper understanding. And CASA is engaged in those conversations. This is a teachable moment, and I hope that CASA learns from it. With regard to the funding that you've asked about, the council has oversight measures in place for nonprofits to ensure that they fulfill the obligations of their contracts. These are open contracts that the county provides using a variety of methods. Let me be very clear about this. Contract providers are always open to change, but we will never waver in our support for providing services to vulnerable immigrant families. Our immigrant communities will continue to receive the support that they need. That is my pledge, and I venture to guess that is the pledge that this council and the county executive would make as well. Regardless of who provides these services, we are going to make sure these services are provided. I also want to share that we recently approved an additional $1.2 million for the nonprofit security grant program to protect institutions like synagogues and Jewish community centers and mosques that might be the target of violence. And I mentioned earlier about the anti-hate task force. So if you have questions about what particular communities say they need and want to feel safe, I encourage you to go back into the archives to see those report outs. But also this Thursday will be the Hispanic and Latino cohort. This might possibly be mentioned there as well. But you know, I'll end with this note. From me, as an elected official and a member of the Jewish community, I have been concerned about rising anti-Semitism and also a rise in Islamophobia and xenophobia across Montgomery County and this country. I implore all of us to treat each other with respect and listen with empathy to people from different backgrounds. I've seen the stuff that's floating around on social media. Hate by any group is not welcome here. It has been an extremely difficult time for so many people. And just as we have spent so many years working together to combat racism and sexism and homophobia and other forms of bigotry, we must come together and stand against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and xenophobia. That is the only way that we will truly live in peace and live in a peaceful society.
Thank you, Council President Glass. Reporters, just a friendly reminder, if you have any more questions, please note that in the chat. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment. Reporters, if you have any questions, please note that in the chat. Going once, or you can raise your hand. Going twice. 3 times. Okay, back to you, Council President Glass.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Again, there's a lot that we're working on here as we start wrapping up the year. If you have any questions about anything that I mentioned and want a deeper dive or want to be pointed in the right direction, don't hesitate to reach out to our PIO team, Jordan and others, or reach out to me individually. But with that, thank you for continuing to cover Montgomery County. We appreciate you and have yourselves a good afternoon.